Stone Soup by Marcia Brown. Three soldiers trudged down a road in a strange country. They were on their way home from the wars. Besides being tired, they were hungry. In fact, they had not eaten anything for 2 days. "How I would like a good dinner tonight," said the first. "And a bed to sleep in," said the second. "But all of that is impossible," said the third. "We must march on." On they marched. Suddenly, ahead of them, they saw the lights of a village. "Maybe we'll find a bite to eat there," said the first. "And a loft to sleep in," said the second. "No harm in asking," said the third. Now the peasants of that place feared strangers. When they heard that three soldiers were coming down the road, they talked amongst themselves. "Here come three soldiers. Soldiers are always hungry, but we have little enough for ourselves." And so they hurried to hide their food. They pushed sacks of barley under the hay in the lofts. They lowered buckets of milk down the wells. They spread old quilts over their carrot bins. They hid their cabbages and potatoes under their beds. They hung their meat in the cellars. They hid all they had to eat, and then they waited. The soldiers stopped first at the house of Paul and Françoise. "Good evening to you," they said. "Could you spare a bit of food for 3 hungry soldiers?" "We have had no food for ourselves for 3 days," said Paul. Françoise made a sad face. "It has been a very poor harvest." The 3 soldiers went on to the house of Albert and Louise. "Could you spare a bit of food? And have you some corner where we could sleep for the night?" "Oh, no," said Albert. "We gave all we could spare to the soldiers who came before you." "Our beds are full," said Louise. At Vincent and Marie's, the answer was the same. It had been a poor harvest, and all the grain must be kept for seed. And so it went all through the village. Not a peasant had any food to give away. They all had good reasons. One family had to use the grain for feed. Another had an old sick father to care for. All had too many mouths to fill. The villagers stood in the street and sighed. They looked as hungry as they could. "Oh, so hungry." The 3 soldiers talked together. Then the first soldier called out, "Good people!" And the peasants drew near. "We are 3 hungry soldiers in a strange land. We have asked you for food, and you have no food. Well then, we'll just have to make stone soup." The peasants stared. Stone soup? That would be something to know more about. "First, we'll need a large iron pot," the soldier said. The peasants brought the largest pot they could find. "How else to cook enough?" "That's none too large," said the soldiers, "but it will do. And now, water to fill it and a fire to heat it." It took many buckets of water to fill the pot. A fire was built on the village square, and the pot was set to boil. "And now, if you please, 3 round, smooth stones." Those were easy enough to find. The peasants' eyes grew round as they watched the soldiers drop the stones into the pot. "Any soup needs salt and pepper," said the soldiers as they began to stir. Children ran to fetch the salt and the pepper. Stones like these generally make very good soup. But oh, if only there were carrots, it would taste much better. "Oh, why, I think I have a carrot or two," said Françoise, and off she ran. She came back with her apron full of carrots from the bin beneath the red quilt. A good soup should have cabbage, said the soldiers as they sliced the carrots into the pot. But no use asking for what you don't have. I think I could find a cabbage somewhere, said Marie, and she hurried home. Back she came with 3 cabbages from the cupboard under the bed. If only we had a bit of beef and a few potatoes. This soup would be good enough for a rich man's table. The peasants thought it over. They remembered their potatoes and the sides of beef hanging in the cellars. They ran to fetch them. A rich man's soup, and all from a few stones. It seemed like magic. But is it magic, boys and girls? Ah, sighed the soldiers as they stirred in the beef and the potatoes. If only we had a little bit of barley and a cup of milk. This soup would be fit for the king himself. Indeed, he asked for just such a soup when last he dined with us. The peasants looked at each other. The soldiers had entertained the king? Well, but no use asking for what you don't have, the soldiers sighed. The peasants brought their barley from the lofts. They brought their milk from the wells. The soldiers stirred the barley and the milk into the steaming broth while the peasants stared. At last the soup was ready. All of you shall have a taste, the soldiers said. But first a table must be set. Great tables were placed in the square, and all around were lighted torches, which are like candles, like torches are like candles on a stick. Such a soup! How good it smelled, and truly fit for a king. But then the peasants asked themselves, would not such a soup require bread and a roast and cider? Soon a banquet was spread, and everyone sat down to eat. Never had there been such a feast. Never had the peasants tasted such soup. And fancy, all made from stones. They ate and drank and ate and drank, and after that they danced. They danced and sang far into the night. At last they were tired. Then the soldiers asked, is there not a loft where we could sleep? Let such wise and splendid gentlemen sleep in a loft? Indeed, they must have the best beds in the village. So the first soldier slept in the priest's house, the second soldier slept in the baker's house, and the third soldier slept in the mayor's house. In the morning, the whole village gathered in the square to give them a send-off. Many thanks for what you have taught us, the peasants said to the soldiers. We shall never go hungry, now that we know how to make soup from stones. Oh, it's all in the knowing how, said the soldiers, and off they went down the road. Such men don't grow on every bush. So, boys and girls, in this story called Stone Soup, the lesson I think that is trying to be taught here is that when we share with each other, we create more. So in the case of the village, they didn't want to share their food with the soldiers because this family only had so much and this family only had so much, and they barely had enough just for their little family. So if they were going to have to give also to the soldiers, well, they couldn't spare it. But when everyone in the village gave a little something, and they all put it together in one giant pot, and they shared it with each other, then everybody got soup. Everybody got a meal. And when everyone feels like they're being taken care of and that they matter, that increases happiness in our community. And so the villagers, who seemed a little, they were feeling so-so before, when the soldiers showed up and they made stone soup, all of a sudden they said, let's have a party. Let's all gather together. Let's eat, drink, dance. Let's have a great time. And so not only does sharing provide for your basic needs, but it also helps you feel like you belong and it puts you in better spirits and it makes you happier. So during this month of gratitude, one way for us to be happy is to show our appreciation and our care for others, and this increases our happiness. So in the story of the stone soup, the peasants each showed that as a village they all matter together. And so I would like you to do something similar with your family. I want you to cook with your family, and I want each of you to put an ingredient into that dish. And then when you eat that dish for dinner, I want you to look around the table and say, we made this. We take care of each other. And that makes us feel good. And it'll bring you closer together as a family. So I hope you enjoyed this story, boys and girls. And remember, when we take care of each other, it feels good.